The spookiest, highest paying jobs you could get. Hey everybody, my name is Hisham Khan and welcome to Income Over Outcome, where I talk all about college and making money. If you're built different and have this dark side to you, these jobs might be perfect for you. The average human being couldn't do these jobs because you'll deal with sadness, death, and ghosts all of the time. I know for a fact I couldn't do any of these jobs, but if I could, I probably would. One of these towards the end of the list pays well over $340,000. So comment right now what you think it is and let's see who gets it right. Coming in 8th, we have diners. Now I'm not talking about those places where you can go and get omelets in the morning. Diner is actually the technical term for people who work at morgues. It's more common for them to be called morgue assistants or morgue technicians. A lot of what they do has to do with the logistics of handling bodies while they're in the hospital's morgue. So like admitting and releasing them from a morgue, transferring bodies in and out of storage, and even handling some paperwork. Sometimes they can help with autopsies, but they need to be working with someone fully licensed to do that because diners aren't full-on medical doctors. In some states, all you need is a high school diploma or GED. Others require you to have a 4-year bachelor's degree in the mortuary sciences, but in all cases, you need to pass your state certification exam. So if you really want to spend all day surrounded by dead bodies, you can probably get there not too long after high school, and you'll live a pretty decent lifestyle with an average salary of $58,000, which is just above average. In the 7th spot, we have morticians. Sometimes they're also called funeral directors, but they work with the dead people's family members to finalize every little detail of a funeral, from getting a hearse to finding a graveyard, and most importantly, getting the body from the hospital to the funeral home. Morticians are also trained to be embalmers, which is the process of preserving a body and getting it prepared one last time to be seen by family members. It's a pretty complicated process, so it's super important that morticians have the proper training. At the very least, you need an associate's degree in mortuary sciences, but most funeral homes actually prefer you to have a bachelor's. You also need to be licensed in your state and have a few years of on-the-job training before you start doing everything by yourself. It's good to know they don't just throw you into embalming dead bodies. They actually make sure you're comfortable with it before you start doing it alone. Now, according to the Department of Labor, their salary is the exact same as diners at $58,000. Holding the 6th spot are coroners. They're responsible for doing some basic tests on bodies to figure out the cause of death. They don't have a medical license, so they can't do full-on autopsies, but they can help in some basic criminal investigations. Most of them work for the government at one of the 1,500 coroner's offices across the country, doing things like finalizing death certificates and reaching out to the deceased family members. The education requirements are different state by state, but they were actually pretty surprising to me. I figured you would need at least a bachelor's degree because of everything you're dealing with. But no, the minimum requirements are just a high school diploma or a GED with around 640 hours of death investigation training. Some states also have a 240 question certification exam, which covers everything from collecting evidence to the law. And all of that work is well worth it because the average salary is $62,000. Now I have to admit, this 5th one is pretty weird, parapsychologist. But before we get into it, go ahead and hit that like button and notification bell so the YouTube algorithm pushes this video to more people. Parapsychology is actually a pretty controversial topic within the scientific community. Some people argue that it's a branch of psychology because you use the normal scientific method to research paranormal phenomena and explain unusual experiences. Apparently they do legit scientific research and have controlled experiments, although I don't really want to know what they do in those. But as you might be able to guess, there's a lot of hardcore scientists who don't believe in parapsychology because there's not much scientific evidence to prove that paranormal activity is real. Some go as far as to call it sloppy science or even fraud, but there's still a handful of research centers dedicated to it. Legally, there aren't any specific educational requirements to become a parapsychologist, so there aren't any bachelor degrees out there, which is probably for the best because you wouldn't get a job if you majored in that. But shockingly, there is a handful of master's programs and even PhD programs out there. Most parapsychologists work in research at large schools, and if somehow you manage to get one of those jobs, you'll make around $75,000 a year, according to Comparably.com, which is a pretty good living. I definitely wouldn't bank on making a living through parapsychology though. In 4th place, we have forensic toxicologist. Now, toxicology is a study of chemicals on human beings and other living things. But forensic toxicology is a specialty of toxicology where you help in autopsies and help investigators solve crimes by testing bodily fluids and seeing if there are any chemicals present. They can figure out if a person died because they overdosed, if they were poisoned, or if they were accidentally exposed to some natural chemicals like carbon dioxide. You've probably seen toxicologists work in crime shows like CSI, and it can be a pretty high pressure job because once you get samples from a crime scene, people want answers ASAP. But you can't let that pressure get to you because you have to be very detailed and careful in making sure you're getting the right answers. Technically, all you need to become a forensic toxicologist is a bachelor's degree in something like clinical chemistry or toxicology. But it's a fairly competitive field, so most people also go for a master's and try to get certified by either the American Board of Toxicology or the American Board of Forensic Toxicology, both of which have pretty strict requirements. According to ZipRecruiter, the average salary for a forensic toxicologist is $85,000. At number 3, we have funeral home managers, who oversee everything on the business and operational side of a funeral home, and there's a lot more to it than you might think. They do everything from managing finances and staff to marketing and sales so people actually use their funeral home, and sometimes they help funeral directors in planning out the details of funerals. It's pretty much the role you're promoted to after you're a funeral director, so the educational requirements are the exact same. An associate's degree in the mortuary sciences and a state license will do the trick. Funeral home managers are paid surprisingly well at an average of $95,000, which makes this one of the highest paying jobs you can get with just an associate's degree. Now we're getting into the super high paying jobs that pay well over $200,000. Holding the second overall spot are medical examiners, or if you want to use a scientific term, forensic pathologists, who are the experts in doing autopsies. Whenever there's a mysterious or complicated death in one of those crime shows, you'll see that the people's family members or even police officers always request an autopsy. When an autopsy is requested, a forensic pathologist is going to dissect the human body to look at all of the organs and search for signs of trauma. It's a really helpful way to put a story together for the cause of death, and also collecting evidence like DNA and sometimes physical objects like bullets. In a lot of cases, forensic pathologists have to testify in court because they know better than anyone else what happened to a body. They're full-on doctors with super specialized training, so if you want to become one, you have to go to med school and then do a 4-year residency in anatomic pathology and then another residency that's usually around 1 year in forensic pathology. That's 9 years of extra schooling after you finish your bachelor's degree. In my opinion, this is the most gruesome job I've talked about today. Cutting up human beings just isn't my thing, so I think they deserve to get paid a lot, and they do. The average salary for a forensic pathologist is $342,000, well above the average for most doctors. And in first place, we have nocturnists. Just like the name sounds, these are doctors who only work at night. It's a medical specialty that's only become a thing more recently to solve the problem of patients not getting enough care when hospitals have less staff at night. Imagine being the main person responsible for a whole section of the hospital at nighttime and roaming it all alone, with very few people around you. I imagine that could be pretty creepy. Nocturnists are trained in internal medicine, and the job is basically the same exact thing a hospitalist would do, but because you work only at night, you're paid a little bit higher, with an average of $250,000. Even though the pay is lower than that of medical examiners, I ranked it higher because the job isn't as gruesome. I would much rather become a nocturnist than a medical examiner. If you enjoy this video, be sure to smash that like button and click here to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out one of these dope videos and I'll see you next time. But until then, peace.